You are listening to the Booktrospective Podcast, a podcast for all types of books. And even though we read all types of books across all different types of genres, we want to give a disclaimer. Many of our books and a lot of our content sometimes is intended for mature audiences. And we don't believe in censorship, but we do want our listeners to have the opportunity to decide if our episode or podcast is good for them. So with that, let's get into the episode. Hey, it's Dominique.
And Keely.
And you are listening to Booktrospective. And this week we are doing part two of Crescent City, House of Earth and Blood. That's the name, right? I feel like that sounds weird when I say it out loud. But I'm pretty sure that's the full name. I'm gonna double check. I've already said it on the other one. Yeah, House of Earth and Blood. I knew that. Anyways, so Crescent City, House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. And last week we did part one, which is part 1 and 2 of the book. So there's not really a lot to catch up on because we're recording this the next day. But Keely did give a really nice speech this morning, and she made her mom cry. It was very nice. So that was good.
It was an early morning.
It was. Keely got me out of bed early. So I guess I can do like a general recap of part 1. So part 1 covers, so this book is broken into 4 parts, and part 1 covers parts 1 and 2. So we are introduced to, this is a whole new world again with Sarah J. Maas. We are in Midgard, which is the world, and we're in the city of Lunathian. It's a very current day type. I don't want to say fae world because there's not just fae. There's fae, shifters, demons, vampires, angels, archangels, Asteria. There's all kinds of stuff.
Have a lot going on.
A lot. And Bryce Quinlan is our main character. And she, we start out with her and her best friend Danica, who's the alpha of the lead wolf pack in the city. And her friends are murdered by a demon. And that really ruins Bryce's entire life. And so we kind of get a little bit of that in the beginning, the first 5 chapters. And then we jump to about 2 years later or 22 months later, where in this world, there are several different police units. And so one of them is led by angels who are actually mostly slaves to the governor, because they participated in this rebellion 200 years ago. And so she is tasked by the governor, who is an archangel, to work with one of his enslaved angels, Hunt, who they call the Umbra Mortis, to find out who killed Danica, because the person they arrested for her murder was a human, and he has been in prison for 2 years, and the murders have started again. So she's been working with Hunt and her brother. She has a half-brother. His name is Rune. He is a full fae. Bryce is only half fae, half human. She hates her dad. No one even knows that they're actually related. They think that they're cousins. But she's been working with this team to try to figure it out. And where we finish off in part 1 is that all fingers are pointing to Danica's mom being involved in some nefarious way. So, we'll just kind of jump into part 2. There were triggers for this book. We listed them in part 1, but, depression, suicidal ideation,
body shaming,
classism, racism, sexism, all the isms. It's a pretty heavy book for it to be fantasy. It is pretty heavy. So, just make sure you listen to part 1, I guess. This would be a weird place to start. You can start here if you want. But I'm just going to go ahead and jump into the episode. All right, so we're going to start at the beginning of part 3, which is called The Canyon. And if you didn't listen to part 1 for some reason, we are noticing that these parts are named after the levels of hell in this world. So the canyon is the 3rd lowest level. If that makes sense. Anyways. Okay. So we start right after that Bryce and Hunt and Rune and all of them realize that the night that Danica was supposed to be guarding the Temple of Luna and Luna's horn was stolen, that the video footage was swapped and it's only audio, and that it was Sabine, Danica's mom, who swapped the footage or the audio. So we open up right where we stopped, and Bryce is thinking, like, it would make sense. Like, well, actually, I don't know if this is Bryce or Hunt, but one of them is thinking, like, that makes sense because Sabine is, like, higher up. She has the clearance. She would be able to do that. Bryce doesn't think that Sabine would actually kill Danica, but she's, like, doubting herself when she's thinking that. And so Hunt calls out Isaiah to see what Sabine, like, said about Danica that night. Because Sabine was never, like, oh my God, my daughter died. She was angry and attacking, like, right off the bat. And basically what Sabine had said that night was Danica could never stay out of trouble. She should have known better, and she should have, like, watched out for her slut of a roommate. Like, basically Bryce was bad news. So it sounds like Sabine really wanted Danica to be quiet about something, and she wouldn't. So it would make sense that Danica didn't tell if the horn was stolen, if it was Sabine who stole it. So Hunt can't stop thinking about Bryce while they're having this discovery. He's, like, looking at her, and, like, he wants Bryce. Even though he will say that he doesn't out loud, he does. So Bryce is like, I have to clear my head, like, I'm going on a run. It's, like, 1 a.m. And he just, like, runs beside her because obviously, like, he's security. She cannot go by herself. And so she goes on this run, and afterwards she can literally, like, barely walk because she still has the scar from the demon attack 2 years ago. But she just kind of, like, brushes it off. So Rune goes to the med witch clinic. This is, like, the next day because he is looking for the witch that he met the night of the most recent murder. And he thinks, like, she's so beautiful. And basically we learn that witches look like humans, but they worship the three-faced god, which put a pin in that for months down the road. And he asks, how can the horn be fixed, or could it be fixed? And he doesn't really, like, I don't even think he says, how could the horn? He basically asks, like, how could a magical object be fixed? And without, like, telling too many details, the witch puts together that he's talking about Luna's horn. And we still don't know who this witch is. Like, we don't know her name because he never asked it. And she says, like, Luna's horn can't be fixed. She says that maybe some new technology they developed would be able to do it. And he asked if the new queen, Hypaxia, may know. Meanwhile, Victoria, or Vic, one of the 33rd, sends Isaiah to get, like, Hunt and Bryce and bring them to the office because she found a small clip of the demon near the gate. And this leads Bryce and Hunt to go investigate the sewers because they think that is where the demon is being summoned. And Hunt doesn't want Bryce to go down there since she hasn't made the drop yet because why haven't you made the drop, Bryce? Like, you are a risk. We need you to be, like, on all four. Like, we need you at full throttle, and you are gonna die at any moment. But they go down to the sewers, and the sewers lead to the river, and they think that the House of Many Waters may possibly know, like, something about it since that's where the sewers lead. And Hunt admits that he has fun when he's with Bryce, and then he takes a photo of her. If we remember, like, he only had murdery pictures in his phone. He only had 34 pictures for the last 4 years, and it was all, like, crime scene photos. So he, like, finally takes his first real photo, and it's of her. And she has also changed her name in his phone, and she put a picture of herself, and her name is now, like, Bryce Rocks My Socks. So they go home and shower, and, like, Hunt is like, Bryce, what is this? And she's like, what? And he was like, well, I was looking in the closet, and he holds up a freaking unicorn, a unicorn Pegasus. And she's like, it's Jelly Jubilee, which they call JJ. So basically, like, when Bryce was a kid, she had, like, My Little Ponies, but they were, like, Pegasus and unicorns or whatever, and she collected them, and she's like, I even wanted to eat him, but he tastes terrible. And so she keeps it, and he's like, you're 25 years old, Bryce. Like, why do you have this? And, like, mind your business. But basically, he was, like, thinking it was, like, some kind of sex toy. And she's like, no, not at all. So that night, they go to the river, and Bryce loves the otters. So there are these, like, normal otters, like, just animals, just regular animals. But they are, like, messengers. And I feel like, did she say, like, they wear, like, little cute jackets or something?
Yeah.
Like, they're cute. And, like, they basically send them, like, as messengers. She's like, I always wanted to get an otter. But they are meeting Therian. And Therian is a mare shifter. So he lives in the water. And, like, the people in the House of Many Waters, like, they live under the water. And, like, Bryce asked Hunt, have you ever been down there? And he's like, no. Because they're real, like, sketchy about who they want to bring down there. But honestly, I don't want to go down there because I don't want you to pop my bubble or something. And then I just drown. So, like, I don't want to be down there. But Therian is a mare shifter. And so, like, the shifters can, like, be humanoid, but they have to, like, get in the water every day or, like, every so often so that they don't permanently turn into people, I guess. So they meet him at the river. He's a detective for like the House of Many Waters, and he starts calling Bryce like Legs. That's her nickname, like instantly. And basically they're meeting with him because they want him to warn the River Queen. Bryce asks how him and Hunt met, and Hunt says that they worked on like a case last year because his Therian sister was murdered, and so they worked on that case together. And then Hunt and Bryce start working on finding proof about Sabine. So Hunt asks Bryce, like, why did you keep Danica's jacket? And she says, well, Danica had left her clothes in that closet at Jessica's that day, and she knew Sabine would just throw all of Danica's stuff away, so she kept it. And what we learn is that the reason that Danica's always saying through love all is possible, and like why she has it on everything, is because that's what the Oracle told her. Like when she went to go see the Oracle, the only thing she said was through love all is possible. So that's why that saying is really important to Danica and now Bryce. So Hunt says he's surprised that you don't have a tattoo of Jelly Jubilee, and she says maybe I do. And he's like, you literally walk around in your underwear, and like by underwear, bra, and thong. So like, where do you have it? And he's like kind of curious, and she like Bryce is now like Bryce likes him too, because she's like, basically if Hunt was anybody else, she already would have had sex with him at this point. But like, not that she's intimidated by him, but like she could actually really like Hunt, and so he's not like a throwaway basically. But Hunt's like, okay, we need to focus. Like both of us need to focus. And Bryce wants to go question Sabine. So they go to the wolves' den. And right off the gate, they run into Amelie, who is now, like, she's the alpha of the, like, main pack now. And Ethan, Connor's younger brother, is her second. But Amelie is there, and she immediately starts calling Bryce a slut. And basically, the reason they do that is because, again, that night that her friends were murdered, she was at the White Raven, and she had sex with that guy in the bathroom. And all of her phone got hacked, and all her messages got leaked. And I'm like, okay, like, I get it. Like, it wasn't perfect timing. But, like, mind your business. Yeah. Like, whatever. So they're always calling her sluts and stuff. And they're like, we are here to see the Prime, which is Danica's grandfather. But they're like, you're not seeing him, basically. And all she can think about is, like, all of her memories of Danica. Like, there's, like, little wolf pups. And she's like, we used to play with them. And it's real sad. And then Ethan comes out, and he looks just like Connor now. Like, he's grown up, basically. He looks a lot like his brother. And Ethan hates Bryce. And what we learn is that immediately after their deaths, Bryce just ignored him and didn't like reply to any of his messages, when obviously he's freaking out because this is his pack. His brother is murdered now. And like he was probably all alone. Like, and so it was crappy. I mean, I get that she was grieving too, but like she left him alone, and then the text messages got leaked. And so he was basically like, you know, my brother waited 5 years for you. Why would you do this to him? And obviously wolves are like extremely loyal. So that's, you know, he doesn't vibe with that. So Sabine comes and she's like, what do you want? Sabine asks like what they want, and they confront her about the stuff at the temple. And Sabine says Danica wasn't at the temple. And she's like, it's hard to remember when you're high and drunk all the time and like sleeping with strangers. And it just overwhelms Bryce, so she just walks out. And Ethan follows her out and is like, what is this about? And she tells him like, it's starting again. You need to be careful. And then as she leaves, she sees the Prime and she just like runs out. And Ethan chases after her and just pissed me off. And he's like, you never deserved him. And Sabine wants you dead. And I'm like, Ethan, stop. Like, that was so unnecessary. So Hunt's like, what was all of that about? And that's when she tells Hunt, like, the whole backstory about the messages and not responding to Ethan and all this stuff. And Hunt thinks of how mean Ethan was. And he, like, did not expect Ethan to be that way. Because from what he always knew, like, Ethan was really, like, a good guy. So he's really surprised that he acted like that. So Juniper reaches out to Bryce and is basically like, Bryce, like, you should start dancing again. I want you to come back. Like, I have this teacher. She's great. I can hold a spot in the class for you. But Bryce is just like, Bryce still, you know, she's in this suffering mode. She feels like she can't have good things in life. So she's like, no, like, I'm just not ready to dance again. And she's like, I'm not good enough. And so that night Hunt, like, leaves and he goes out and he goes to, like, the bar with his Triari, the 33rd, whatever. I guess you can call them his friends. Like, I don't know. They're kind of his friends. So Bryce shows up and outside, like, they start talking and it's just her and Hunt and they get attacked by a Crystallis demon. And it, like, bites Hunt in the shoulder. And it keeps attacking Hunt, but it never attacks Bryce, which is really strange. So she's able to grab Hunt's gun and, like, shoot it in the head, and then Hunt stabs it in the head, and, like, they just keep shooting it, and then they decapitate it, which, that I love. Like, I love when we make sure that this thing is dead. Mm-hmm. It needs to be all the way dead. So after they do all that, the adrenaline runs out and Hunt like collapses basically. And the same Medwitch shows up to the scene and like they still don't know who this is. So Hunt says that it was weird when he got bit because it's like the venom of the Crystalis demon nullifies his power, that's basically like what they assume happened to Micah because Micah's an archangel. Like, why were you not able to fight this thing? But if it bites you, then the venom nullifies your power. So Micah lands and says, like, who did it attack and who killed it? And he's like, I want this kept quiet. Because, again, Bryce is really, like, because Hunt's like, we both did. And I'm like, that looks so bad if, like, Bryce, this, like, little weak thing, keeps killing these demons.
Right.
So Bryce says, like, how do I keep getting away? But the whole pack couldn't fight off this demon, basically. And they tell Micah about their theories about Sabine. And he's like, we just need more evidence. So that night, Hunt flies them home, and they, like, land on the roof. It's raining, and he's, like, nuzzling her neck. They're about to kiss, and freaking Sabine busts through the door, because she's been, like, waiting on them. And she's, like, pointing a gun at Bryce and says, like, you just couldn't leave this alone. And Bryce is like, you killed Danica because she was going to replace you. And Sabine's like, what? Like, I wouldn't kill my own daughter. Hunt tells Sabine, like, we know you stole the horn and we know that you swapped the footage. And she says, I swapped the footage because I was protecting her. Danica stole the horn. Did you see that coming? Nope. Okay.
Did not.
So Sabine says, I cleaned up her mess and now you're ruining her legacy because basically everyone's going to find out. And Sabine says, I've been waiting here all night for you because they're like, you summoned the demon. And she's like, I've literally been in your apartment, like, waiting for you to show up. And Amelie saw, like, what you guys are, like, she saw you about to hook up on the roof, basically. Again, mind your business. And Sabine says, I did not kill my daughter. And she just, like, leaps off the roof. So they go, that's the end of that night. They go to work the next day at the library or at the gallery. And Rune comes and joins them. But they don't tell him about their Sabine suspicions. But Rune tells them about this synthetic healing power he's learned about from the Medwitch. And basically he thinks it might be able to heal the horn because it is basically like light that isn't light, magic that isn't magic. Because it's like synthetic man-made, but does have magical properties to it. And so Bryce tells Rune about Danica stealing the horn. And Rune says that the horn has no power without this knife, apparently. A pair formed from a meteorite, but the knife was lost. Any thoughts? Okay. I'll keep it to myself. So anyways, there's this knife out there that's missing. So they have this like theory or phrase basically in the Fae world, and it says, when the knife and sword are reunited, so should our people be. And it's like engraved across the city. So apparently whatever this knife is going to be really important. And Lahaba says, she tells them, like, well, I'm a descendant of this queen. And Bryce is like, no, you're not. And she's like, yes, I am, BB. Like, I am descendant of whatever the queen's name is. And she, like, just keeps telling them. And Flynn calls saying that there was, like, some kind of petty fight in the Ox. And Rune needs to come handle it. And Bryce says, basically to Hunt, like, Rune has to go do stupid stuff like that because his daddy makes him and he's scared of his dad, basically. And Bryce says, did you ever ask what happened to the last Starborn prince? And basically, like, she's basically hinting at, she thinks that her dad, because the Autumn King is not Starborn and is jealous, killed the last Starborn prince. And so, like, basically, like, you need to be careful because even though you're not more powerful than our dad, like, he still is probably not happy that you're Starborn. But Rune doesn't believe that's true. And so then Bryce gets a little message from an otter. Therian sent her an otter. And basically what we find is that there has been another body found in the river. And it has the same markings from the Crystalis demon. And so they have also like found other bodies like this. But Bryce is like, okay, but Danica didn't have a body. Like the pack and Danica were literally ripped to shreds. There was no like just like these people, like even when the demon was attacking Micah, like it was like trying to claw at his chest, but it wasn't like ripping him to shreds. And that's like literally she said that Danica and the pack were like in chunks on her bed. So she's like, something worse must have been summoned to like do whatever it did to Danica and them. So she goes home and she's like, okay, like we're just gonna like call down to hell and summon up a little beast. And I'm with Hunt. Like, I'm sorry, what? Excuse me. So she has that salt that she had bought. So she sets it up and she's like, well, like it can't get out of the circle. She's in a circle with Hunt and then there's a circle for the demon. And she tells Hunt, like, because Hunt's like, should I arrest you for this? Like, this is illegal. And she's like, no one likes a narc. And he says, I am a narc. Like, you are the police. You are the police. And so she does her little summoning thing. It gets real cold, real creepy. But a demon doesn't show up. It's a beautiful man. She summoned Prince Adis from the chasm. He's the prince of the chasm. And that's like the 5th level of hell. So there's only 2 levels that are worse than that level, which is the pit and the abyss, maybe. So Hunt immediately notices that this is not the first time she's met Adis, because he's like very familiar. And he's like, okay, what the hell? So we also learned during this time that Prince Adis, again, is from the 5th level, but the worst level is the pit. And the prince of the pit, they don't even say his name because of how like scary he is, basically. And they refer to him as the Star Eater because he is the only person that's ever, or like being that's ever been able to kill one of the Asteri. He ate the Asteri that was known as Sirius, so they call him Star Eater. Okay. So we learned that Bryce had met Prince Adis when she was 13 years old. And he says, yeah, you were sad back then too. And basically, when she went to go see the Oracle, we know that her dad like abandoned her. So she went and like sat on this bench. She was sad. She was 13. And this white cat appeared to her, which is what Adis's like animal form is. So they start asking like Adis all these questions about the demons and stuff. And he's like, I don't know what killed Danica or who summoned it. And he looks at Hunt and he's like, why do you have that black crown on your head? Which is really weird way to refer to like a slave tattoo. And Hunt's like, what do you mean? But he doesn't really say any more about that. So then he starts talking about the Northern Rift because they're like, the Northern Rift opens to hell. And he's like, no, the Northern Rift opens to other planets and other realms. And he says that the angels were made here on Midgard, but the Fae and the Shifters came from another place. And Adis asks Bryce, what blinds an oracle? And she says, what cat visits an oracle? And as he leaves, Bryce tells him thank you for that day. And he says, make the drop, Bryce, and come find me when you're done. And says, the oracle did not see, but I did. So Hunt turns to her after he's gone and says, have you lost your goddamn mind? He's like, are you insane? And then he's like, how did you meet? So then she tells him like that whole story or whatever. And then Hunt calls Declan and basically says like, I think we should run tests again on the victims for synth, which again is like this new like drug that's out in the streets. And what we learn is that, because Declan's like, well, didn't they already test for that? And he's like, yeah, but I think they might have missed something. And what we learn is that the Fae have some special kind of test that can identify synth, but the test that was run on their clothes and stuff 2 years ago did not test for that. And Bryce is like, what the hell? Like, why didn't it? And she finds out that the Autumn King had put an order to not run the test. And she's like, okay, we're going to see that man. So she gets to his like office and the guards will not let him in. Or let them in, and they call her scum, and they're talking bad about Hunt, and like Rune's like, stand down, but they won't even listen to Rune. So Bryce like turns to Rune, and she's like, he knows what happened and didn't tell. Like she's like assuming like because he wouldn't let them do that testing, he knows why Danica died, and he's known this entire time. So she tells the guards, she keeps telling the guards to like let her in, and they won't. And she like just leaves and she runs to a bar and she's like, I'm having a drink today. And she calls Juniper and she's like, come meet me at this bar. But Juniper's like, I'm busy or whatever. So she like takes a shot of whiskey and she's like, that's awful. And I'm like, correct. And Hunt's like, don't do this. Like, don't get drunk. It's not worth it. Like, you haven't been drinking. And even Juniper's like, you're drinking? Like, what's wrong? So instead of like admitting that, she's upset, she like insults Hunt and he's like, she's basically said something about how he was trying to like make out with her on the roof and now all of a sudden he's saying this stuff. And immediately she regrets what she says, but Hunt's like, I'm just going to go home. I'll see you whenever like you're good or whatever. So she leaves the bar after him, but she goes and gets groceries and she goes home to try like make dinner to apologize. And she's like, tells him like, look, I'm just a mess. And she says, like, I went to get groceries and I went to my storage unit to check for the horn, like to see if I sensed it anywhere. And she keeps Danica's stuff in this like storage unit as well. And she grabbed she grabbed her clothes maybe from the night of the murders. And she just tells Hunt, like, I'm a mess. I was a mess before Danica died. And, like, she's basically like, I'm a half-a, like, waste of space. Like, that's basically how she feels about herself. And Hunt asks her, like, why don't you dance anymore? And she's like, because she's like, basically like, I'm a fat ass. And he's like, your ass is perfect. And Bryce tells him about the motorcycle wreck that her and Danica got in, because we keep, like, referencing back to this. And basically, Danica was, like, chasing after this undercover, like, animal capture ring or whatever, and so they were like chasing these people down, or they went to like release the animals, and then they got chased by these guys and like this mob basically, and then Danica got shot in the leg, and Hunt's like, you killed them, because like thinking like, you know, she has her like shooting skills, and Bryce says, yeah, I did kill some of them. And he tells, like, he's trying to relate to her, so he tells Bryce, like, I never complied with like the stuff that they do here in Lunathian, because he doesn't feel like he fought for the wrong side in the war. Like, he feels like he was a little bit of like a fool for how blindly he followed Shahar, but he still thinks like it was the right like core mission of what they were trying to do. And he says that, you know, he basically feels like no matter what he did in life, because of his powers and because he was lowborn, that no matter what, he was going to be used for his power somehow. And he tells her, like, all I want to do in life is like kill all of them and then maybe like be with you, basically. And I was like, oh. And so she says, okay, like the reason I don't dance is because I don't want to feel joy. And he says, we have to keep living because it pisses other people off. Like, we can't give in to them, because then they win, basically. And Bryce says, when they were at the bar earlier, she goes, you called this place home, and tells him, like, you can stay here as long as you want, basically. And that night, she has a strange dream about Adis. So Hunt gets called to Micah's office, and Micah wants to know, 1, why are you having Vic test clothes for synth? And 2, Sabine came in and was super pissed off that she's a suspect, and says that, just so you know, Shahar is offering to trade for you again at a pretty nice price. So, like, basically get your shit together and stay in line, or you're going, or not Shahar, Sandriel. And so basically, like, he'll send you back to Sandriel if you don't, like, start acting right. And then he sends Hunt out on another, like, terrible mission, basically. And so Bryce is, like, texting him, because they're, you know, they communicate now, and she's like, how are you doing? Like, all this stuff. So he immediately goes into, like, his Umbra Mortis mode, and he doesn't text her back. And so, like, she, like, lets it slide, and then she's like, it's late, and she's like, where is he? So she calls, like, Vic, and she's like, you know where Hunt is? Like, nobody knows where Hunt is. So she finally, like, gives in, and she, like, calls Rune, and she's like, I don't even know why I'm calling Rune, but she's like, do you know, like, where Hunt is? And as she's on the phone with him, Hunt walks in, and he's, like, completely covered in blood, and he's thinking, like, I wasn't gonna come, I would have, like, went to the comitium and, like, got myself together, but he assumed that Bryce would be asleep. So he, like, just, like, walks off and walks into his room and shuts the door, and he goes in to take a shower. And Bryce goes in there and finds him, like, sitting under the shower, and it's so hot that it is, like, it's, like, my perfect shower. It is so hot that he's literally, like, burning, and she can see his skin, like, healing as he, like, burns under the shower. And she, like, reaches in to, like, turn it down and burns herself, like, in the process, because it's so hot. And all he can think is, like, he hates her seeing him like this. So she gets in the shower, like, fully clothed. And because, like, he's sitting there, and, like, she just, like, starts washing his hair, washing his body. And she tells him, you look how I feel every day. And he just, like, watches her. He doesn't say anything. And so she's, like, washing him up. And then she, like, looks down because she's like, oh, yeah, he is naked. And she's like, I'll leave your bottom half for you to enjoy. So she, like, cleans him off as much as she can. And she, like, gets him out of the shower. She gets, like, underwear on him, and then she's, like, looking at his shirt, because obviously he has wings, and she's like, I have no idea. Which I love when people, like, speculate, like, how do they wear shirts? Yeah. Like, she's like, basically this shirt has, like, these weird, like, slits on the back for their wings, and she's like, yeah, I don't know how to do that. So she's like, underwear it is. So she, like, takes him to, like, get in the bed, and he, like, grabs her and basically is like, stay with me. So she, like, just, like, she's soaking wet, so she just, like, puts on his t-shirt and, like, sleeps in the bed with him. So the next day, Juniper calls and, like, snaps at her because she never showed up to the dance class. And she's like, I, like, saved this class for you. Like, you should have came, but whatever. And that morning, Hunt is cooking, like, try to, like, basically repay the favor. And, like, she's super turned on. Like, all she can think about is, like, having sex with him in this kitchen. And, of course, he's a Vanir. Like, though this is my worst nightmare about these fantasy worlds, is, like, they can smell everything. Like, so he immediately knows. Like, he, like, looks at her. He can smell that she's turned on. He can, like, tell her, like, like her legs are like tight. Like he's like, yeah, he knows, she knows, like whatever. And they have like this like moment. They like get close, but then like the bacon or whatever starts burning. So that doesn't happen. And Jessica calls and says like she needs to get to the office. So they go to the office, and this scary water demon creature thing known as a knock is delivered. And Lahaba's like, it wants to eat me. It wants to murder me. And it like stares. It has like teeth and like looks at them and like claws on like the glass. Oh my. No, ma'am. No, thank you. No, thank you. And we learned like, so this has all only been like 2 weeks because the summit is still 2 weeks away. So her mom calls, Bryce's mom calls and is like, I want to visit. And so that's when she's like, I still have a roommate, blah, 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 blah. And so basically Ember's like, okay, I want to meet this guy. So we're going to FaceTime tonight. So Bryce starts like speed cleaning her house because she's like, my mom can see dirt through the phone. And she can tell if I like magic clean it or if I scrub clean it. And like, so she calls, so that's going to be later tonight. But before they talk to Ember, they go and meet with Vic. And she says that Danica and Maximus's like clothes test positive for synth. And so Bryce calls Rune, who's got like research on the synth from the nurse, the med witch. And basically Rune says like, it's a really, really great drug basically. But one of the ingredients is the black obsidian salt. So Bryce asks Hunt like what happened to his parents basically. And we learned that Hunt doesn't know who his dad is. He never did. But Hunt's mom was like she was a human, right? I feel like she was a human. Maybe not. No, because he's not half anything. So she must have been an angel. I breezed over that part. Whatever she was a lower. And so, like, when he went to, like, work with Shahar or whatever, like, he would send her money back. And so one day she got robbed and they killed her. And that's, like, when he decided to make the job. This must have been before he got with Shahar, though. That timeline's a little weird. But basically, he was working, he would send her money, and then she got murdered. And that was all he had. So Hunt meets the parents basically. So Ember calls, they FaceTime, and she's like, have you cleaned? And she's like, Mom, I just got done cleaning. And she's like, yeah, okay, I can see the dirt. But so her mom asks like, does he know about JJ? So Jelly Jubilee. And she's like, okay, if he knows about JJ, that means that you really trust him. So like, why is he really here? Because like, you're not going to keep telling me like, oh, we're working on a case, blah, blah, blah. So they tell her that Micah is working with Jessica on something. And so like, they've been kind of paired together. And Hunt snitches about like the scar on Bryce's leg and says like, did she ever go see like a med witch about it? And basically he's like, it bothers her and she's like always limping. And Hunt thinks that it must still have them in it. And basically, if Bryce makes the drop before getting this healed, then she'll, like, be permanently, like, injured. So she has to get it taken care of. And Bryce's mom asks if her dad is involved, like, in this investigation or whatever. And basically, like, Hunt leaves or something. And Ember's like, no matter how nice Hunt is, like, just remember he's the Vanir male. And, like, she starts, like, bringing up all her past trauma with Bryce's dad. And she tells Bryce also that just because Danica died doesn't mean that you have to suffer too. So after their phone call, Bryce tells Hunt like a little bit more about like how Randall, her stepdad, and Bryce's mom met. So basically when Ember ran from the Autumn King, she went to this temple basically, and that's where she had Bryce. But the Autumn King like ended up finding out or whatever, and he was sending people after them. So they needed to get out of wherever they were at, and they wanted a transport, but obviously Ember doesn't trust like any of the Vanir, so they sent Randall to be like her transport. And like all the guys that came after him, basically Randall like handled them, and they were able to get away. And then like him and Ember just kind of fell in love. So after all of this, Bryce and Hunt go to the meat market to like try to find out more about the synth, but basically what we find out is the Viper Queen also doesn't like mess around with synth and like does not let them sell it in the meat market. But there's another girl in the market there, and she says like basically you should ask the mayor, Therion, like what he knows about it because they sell it on the river. So they go and see him, and Bryce is like, okay, so are they dealing this drug on the river? And he's like, yeah. Then she's like, okay, well, who was doing it? And he says, Danica. Also, I just want to note that I am not a fan of Danica. Like, she was okay in the beginning, but like,
Okay,
She pissed.
I'm glad I wasn't really the only one.
No, a lot of people don't like Danica.
Okay.
There's a large group of Danica haters. Like, no, ma'am, I don't like how she got down at all. So basically, what we learn is prior to Danica dying, she was spotted doing a deal, and the synth essentially like it makes humans and Vanir, it makes them like super powerful. So, like, the humans like it too, like that, because they think, like, it kind of, like, levels them up, basically, with the Vanir. So, Bryce is like, okay, no, like, she wasn't dealing it. She must have just been seizing it. And so she calls Fury, and Fury actually does answer. And she asks Fury about the synth, and Fury's like, you just need to stay away from it. Like, she doesn't want to answer any questions, but she's like, you need to stay away from it. And Fury knew that Danica knew about it. So Bryce is like, what the? Like, why does everyone know all this stuff, and I don't know anything? And basically, Fury says that Danica didn't want you to know about synth because she was afraid that you'd take it. And she's like, what do you mean that I would take it? Like basically, like, I'm not a crackhead. And she's like, okay, so Danica didn't want Bryce to know about the synth because she was afraid she would take it, which Bryce is upset about. But Fury's like, okay, well, first of all, Bryce, like, we've seen you take all kind of drugs. Like, they all did drugs. But also, because Bryce is always saying how, like, she's the weakest link. And so, like, they kind of were like, we don't want her to know about it and then take it so that she can feel, like, equal with us, basically. So Fury tells Bryce that she will be back for the summit, and Bryce calls Rune, and Rune tells her, like, well, the Med Witch has said that she's trying to make an antidote for synth. And Bryce tells him that she thinks that Danica knew the synth could cure the horn, so she stole it first and was killed for it. Yeah, so Hunt tells Bryce basically, like, I feel like Danica kept a lot of stuff from you. Which, yeah, facts. To a sickening degree. So, the Med Witch basically needs the Crystallos the Crystallos venom to try and make an antidote for synth. And Hunt's like, okay, well, let's get some, basically. But Bryce is trying to break into Danica's computer, and she's basically, like, used every password she can possibly think of, and they're not working. And he's like, are you bleeding? And she's like, yes, I got my period. Which, oh, what the? I'm walking around the world, and, like, you guys would just smell that I'm on my... No personal info. There's no privacy in this world. There's no privacy. Like, what the hell? But she's like, so it's funny because in Athalar, they only get their periods like twice a year. And like, so that kind of carried over because like the humans are like normal. They get it every month. And then she's like, basically because she's half fae, she gets hers like every 3 months. So she goes to work and Lahaba tells her like, he wants to kill me, like talking about the knock in the tank. And Hunt wonders, like, why is Bryce in such a bad mood today? And he sees her, like, leave Jessica's, and she goes to this bakery, and then she goes out to the river, and we find out that it's Danica's birthday. And she had gotten, I think it was those chocolate croissants again, and on them, it was the word trash. And Hunt knows that this was Amelie. So he takes those pastries. I love Hunt for this. He goes to see Amelie. And he, like, slams her up against the wall. He was, like, choking her out. Everyone's, like, recording. And he tells her, like, don't ever speak to Bryce again or go near her again. And he's, like, choking her. And Ethan, like, comes out and is like, what is going on? And he asks Amelie, like, what did you do, basically? So Bryce decides, like, okay, I'm going to take the venom. I'm finally going to get my scar fixed. And I think we can pull the venom from my scar. And Hunt admits that to Bryce that he was actually the one that found her that night because she obviously doesn't like remember. It's probably like a fever dream to her. She doesn't remember that Hunt was there. And they go and see the Med Witch, and the witch asks Hunt like about his halo. And she's like, basically like, who did that? And he's like, some old crone. And he says, why, you want to take it off? And she's like, well, what would you do if I did?
I was like,
I know, right? So she basically has to like stick a needle into Bryce's leg and like extract the venom, and it's like super like ensnarled in like her tissue, and it hurts super bad because she's like, I can numb it, but like we'd have to wait a couple of days, and Bryce is like, no, we need to do it now, like let's just do it. So she does it, but she does get it out. And after that, Micah is like, I need Bryce and Hunt in my office now. And so Hunt knew this was coming. He's in trouble for what happened with Amelie. So Sabine's there. She wants him dead. She's like, I want him dead, basically. And Micah's like, that's an archaic, like, tradition or whatever. So he's like, I'll give him, what do they call it? The angel's death? Something death.
Human's death?
Something like death. And he cuts off Hunt's wings. Oh my God. And while this is happening, Amelie's like, Sabine, like, no, like, I'm good. Like, I don't want to do this. I'm like, no, Amelie. No, you stand right here. You sucker. So, like, yeah, Sabine's like, and Sabine is telling, like, or no, Bryce tells Sabine, like, you didn't even deserve Danica. Like, she's a terrible person. And Sabine tells Bryce, like, I know, like, what happened with the Underking. And she's like, then I guess Sabine like went to the bone quarter and tried to see Danica, and Danica would not come and like speak to her. And then what we find out is that Bryce bargained her soul for Danica's because she wasn't sure that Danica would make it across the river without her boat tipping, and she just couldn't stand that. So she basically was like, take my spot and give it to Danica, which the Underking never told her like that Danica wasn't gonna, like, he didn't tell her one way or another. He was like, are you sure? And she was like, yeah. So basically, like, when Bryce dies, she has nowhere to go. Like, her soul will just poof into there's no final resting place.
I was like, well, that's kind of stupid.
Yeah, like, so, because basically, like, they rest in the bone quarter, like, their spirits or their souls. I don't know. It's kind of weird, but yeah. So Bryce will have nowhere to go. So Micah cuts off his wings. They'll grow back, but, like, it's super painful and bleeding and stuff. So she takes Hunt home, and she, like, takes him and like just puts him in her bed, and Hunt wakes up and like she's sleeping next to him. So she goes back to trying to hack the password the next day for Danica's computer, and it's through Love All Is Possible, but it's in like the old language basically. And she finds a folder with her name on it, and in the folder is a picture of Danica's jacket, and so she's like, what? So she's like, okay, this must be a clue. So she grabs the jacket and she feels like right around like one of the letters, and there's a flash drive in it, and there's just a video on this flash drive. So she has to like go to work. So she leaves Rune to babysit Hunt, and that's when she was like hacking this whole thing. So when she gets home, like Rune's gone, and so she tells Hunt about the video. And basically what we learn is that, yeah, the synth is great, but it literally, in certain doses, like basically causes you to like Hulk out and kill yourself. And so they were doing these like human trials basically, and like Danica got a video of it because she used to do the security there. For whatever reason, this conversation leads to them hooking up. I don't know what about that turned them on, but that was okay. So they do start hooking up, but then like they bump his like angel wing stubs and he starts like bleeding. So she was like, oh, I'm sorry. So like, that's the most we really get out of this book, honestly, is that one little scene. That's it. So after that, Bryce decides like, okay, I'm going to go back to my apartment, like, and see if I can just find anything there. But as she's on her way to the old apartment, the building is literally on fire, and there's like innocent people caught in this. Like, she's like, great, like somebody knows that I'm onto it, and they're burning this building down. And so then she gets a call right after that from Therian, and he's like, there's a deal going down on the river right now. So she gets to the river, and there is in fact a deal. And who's doing it? It's the Viper Queen with Hunt and Vic and Justinian. And she didn't realize it was Hunt because obviously he doesn't have any wings. But then she like, his build, everything else is the same. He just doesn't have wings. And he immediately is like Bryce, like, no, like it's not this. And then Micah lands because the Viper Queen set them up. You idiots. Oh, you idiot. So basically, Hunt's like trying to talk to her, and what they want to do is basically they want him, Vic, and Justinian wanted to take the synth to basically like finish out what Shahar was trying to do. Like he was like trying to finish out this rebellion. But Hunt says like this was before he knew about the video, so he was actually trying to stop it basically tonight, but it was too late. He tells Bryce, like, Danica was dealing. She leaked it to the streets, basically, and then she's the one who killed those students during the blackout, and that's why she knew Maximus, because they both took synth, basically. And Micah tells Bryce, like, Hunt knew the truth the whole time, basically, and what he says is that Danica is the one who killed herself and the pack, because she, like, spazzed out on synth, and she was, like, pleading with herself to, like, stop, but she's the one who killed the pack, and she killed herself. Oh my God. And Hunt is like still trying to like approach Bryce and like apologize, but Fury pops up out of the darkness. And she's like has a gun pointing at him. And then Micah is like basically he arrests everyone, and what we learn is that anytime someone uses synth, because it has that obsidian salt in it, it also summons the Crystallos demon. So now Bryce assumes that Hunt is the one who burned down her old apartment building, and he like basically knew like she was onto the trail and was like trying to cover the tracks, and she's like she doesn't believe anything that he ever said, and like basically he was only trying to like tell her like whatever she wanted to hear when he was getting arrested, because he knows that basically Micah's probably going to kill him. And Fury comes to her and basically says that Micah crucified Justinian like in the lobby of the Comitium. He ripped Victoria out of her body and like because she's a wraith, put her in a box and threw her to the bottom of the ocean to just like continuously drown for the rest of her life. Don't know how that works, but that sounds pretty awful. And Hunt is to be determined, which is kind of strange. And then we go to part 4, which is the ravine. So Hunt is in a cell, and like, so he's off in a cell. Bryce is at work, and the med witch shows up and brings her the antidote that she's crafted. And then the Autumn King comes to visit Bryce. So we switch back over to Hunt, and so Sandriel is basically torturing him. So she's basically put all his like pictures and like text messages on the screen in this room, so like everyone can see it, he can see it. And all Bryce can think about is, or all Hunt can think about is that, like, this was the life I was so close to having, and I basically messed it up because I just couldn't get off of this rebellion thing, and, like, now I'm gonna suffer, basically. So Fury comes and visits Bryce, and she tells Bryce, like, she's headed to the summit, but she wants to let her know what is going to happen to Hunt. And basically, Micah gave Hunt back to Sandriel for nothing. He just said, take him. And
which I figured that was coming.
Yeah, like that was the punishment. Yeah. So like that sucks for Hunt real bad. There will never be any freedom in his future. And Sandriel is basically like she's going to the summit too, so she's going to take Hunt with her and then like go back to wherever she's from. And Fury asks like Bryce, like, are you and Hunt a thing? And Bryce is like, no. And she says, like, she does tell Bryce, like, look, you always forgave Danica for all of Danica's bullshit. Like basically like maybe don't be so hard on Hunt. And she tells Bryce, like, the reason that she basically hasn't been talking to her for 2 years, which I think is crappy, but whatever. So she basically says that, like, Fury basically had all this guilt from the night that Danica and the pack was murdered, because she gave Bryce the drugs that night, and she, like, just couldn't deal with Danica's death, and so she couldn't talk to her, basically. And she's like, well, you talked to Juniper, and basically what we find out is that Juniper and Fury are, like, a couple. So that's why she's like, I can't choose love, basically. Like, I can't not talk to Juniper. And Bryce tells Fury, okay, but I needed you. And she says, basically, like, what we learned is that something pretty, like, terrible happened to Bryce one night. And, like, Juniper was the only person that was there to, like, save her in between, like, the time of the death and now. And it's revealed later, but basically, like, Bryce was suicidal. So she was on the roof of her apartment. She was probably thinking about jumping. And, like, if Juniper hadn't come, like, she probably would have killed herself. And that, like, after this conversation with Fury, Bryce decides, like, I'm not gonna, like, because right now she's been like, I don't care what happens to Hunt, like, he deserves it, whatever. But after talking to Fury, she's like, okay, I'm gonna save him, like, whatever. So Hunt's at the Comitium. He's getting ready to leave with Sandriel. They're heading to the summit, and Bryce comes in the lobby. And Justinian is still, like, crucified in this lobby. Like, his body's just hanging there. And so she goes up to Sandriel, and she's like, I want to buy Hunt from you. And she's basically taken another loan from Jessica for 97 million gold mercs. Like, that's an insane amount. And, like, Sandriel basically, like, laughs at her and is like, no. So then she, like, offers her the amulet that she wears, and she takes it off, and Sandriel just, like, melts it into a puddle of gold. And so then Bryce is like, take me instead. And Sandriel's like, why would I want you? But then Sandriel exposes Bryce's secret to the world. And she says, the only daughter of the Autumn King. She's like, yeah, I knew about you, basically. And she's like, how embarrassing. Like, this must be for your dad. And so Rune, like, he's there too. And he, like, comes up and he's like, Bryce, like, basically, like, Bryce is my property because I'm, like, we're the head of the House of Sky and Breath. And until she's married, she's my property. And she's my sister. And you cannot sell yourself over, basically.
And that obviously didn't bode well with her.
Yeah, it was like, I'm nobody's property. And he's like, you are my property until you get married. And so, like, she's pissed. And she tells him she hates him. She will never forgive him. And, like, Bryce storms off. And Flynn and Declan are like, she's your sister? Because they're For the last 20 years, like, we didn't know. And they're basically like, why did you never tell us? And he tells them, like, look, my dad pretty much ordered me never to tell anybody. And also Bryce didn't want anybody to know. So I didn't say anything. So Bryce runs off and she goes to sit at the river and she gets attacked by a demon. And luckily, Rune is behind her. And so Rune basically, like, saves her and, like, is able to kill it. Because the demon literally, like, drags her into the water and, like, tries to kill her. And Rune saves her, and she still says, like, you're dead to me, basically. And I'm like, Bryce, stop it. And the demon did scratch her, but she's like, it almost got her tattoo, but it didn't fully get it. So she's still good. So we switch over to Hunt, and he's at the summit. And, like, this summit is basically, like, everybody who's anybody is there. So Sandriel has him there. She also has Pollux, the Hawk, and the Hellhound with her. Fury is there. Isaiah's there with Micah. The wolves are there. Sabine's there. There are no human representation. Rune is there with the Autumn King. Jessica's there. The witches are there. And their queen comes in. And we learn finally who the Met Witch was. It's Queen Hypaxia this whole freaking time.
I was not expecting that.
So basically what we'll learn is that Hypaxia, like she said, like, what she was telling Rune is like, oh, I'm like covering this clinic. Basically, like, it's not mine. But yeah, no, this was Queen Hypaxia the whole time. But the reason nobody knows who she is because her mom kept her, like, away. Like, she, like, I don't know if it says it in this book or the other. It's not like a super spoiler, but like, Hypaxia was trained by, like, ghosts. Like, the witches are able to, like, conjure ghosts. Or something, and like she like lived like in this remote location and no one had ever even seen Hypaxia before, so that's why Rune didn't know. So not only was she the queen, but this is his betrothed the whole time and he has no idea who this girl is. And the Stiri come in and there's 6 of them, so there used to be 7, but again the Prince of the Pit 8 one. And they are so weird. Like, they all have different bodies, but they basically have, like, inhabited these fae bodies. And we'll learn that Rigelus, who is, like, the head of this theory, he, like, is in, like, a teenage body, which is so creepy. Like, and everyone is, like, terrified of this theory. Like, they are, like, it's so, like, creepy and scary to talk to them. So we see one of Rune's nice little powers, wink, wink. And he is able to mind speak. Because he mind speaks to Hunt. Because he's like, what the hell? And he's like, I can't actually like talk to you in person. But yeah, I have this nice little power from my mom's people. Okay. So, anyways. And basically, this is like when Hunt asked like, okay, did you know that like this witch the whole time was Hypaxia? And Rune's like, no, I had no idea. So they like basically like one of the things they're doing at the summit is like formally recognizing Hypaxia as the queen of the witches. And then Micah like basically because they're having it in Lunathian or near Lunathian or whatever, he like kicks off the official summit. So Bryce is watching the summit on TV and she apologizes to Lahaba. She's like, you know, I haven't been a good friend. And Lahaba says, we'll get through it together, BB. My heart. So like, this whole summit is just, like, political, government, blah, 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 blah. So, Rune asks Hypaxia, because this is, like, the most boring thing in the entire world. It's basically people throwing their weight around. So, Rune is, like, talking to Hypaxia, and he's like, so, why didn't you say who you were? And she says, well, you didn't ask who I was. You never even asked my name. But she says, I really wanted to just see, like, what an ordinary life was like, because she's never lived one. And also, she had heard, like, that things were going on, and she was trying to find out for herself. So he asks her, like, do you know about the betrothal plans, basically? And she does, pretty much. And Micah's like, hey, gotta go back to the city, got a meeting. I'll be back. So he leaves. And everybody's like, this meeting is so boring, blah, 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 blah. So it's boring. So Bryce is still at Jessica's. So we learned that basically she's not going home since this whole thing with Hunt. She's like, there's food containers everywhere. She's showering here. Thankfully, Jessica is like off because she doesn't know that she's basically living in the gallery. And she even like grabbed a new amulet for herself since Sandriel melted hers. And so she's like down in the library with Ahaba, and the Knock is like clawing the glass and smiling at them. And then Syrinx starts like growling, and Micah comes down the stairs because apparently he can just get through the wards and the locks. He's like, oh, the door was open. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. So yeah, and she's like, he can't be here because like this library is like illegal. Like, you can't be here. And she's like, can I help you like upstairs with something? And like, why are you here? And he says, I was looking for you. So we switch over to the summit, and Jessica's like, hey, like, can you put this on the screen? Because Bryce texts her and is like, turn on your camera feeds. Like, what the hell? And Declan, like, pulls the feed up. And so Rune is like, Flynn, get a unit there now. Like, why is Micah there with Bryce? Like, something is not right. And so everyone's like, what the hell's going on? But Sandro's like, I mean, he said he had a meeting, like, whatever, like, not a big deal. And what we learn is that, like, they're like an hour away. And, like, all of the wolves are really pretty much with Sabine. And, like, nobody's answering. So Micah tells Bryce, because they're able to hear everything. They can't talk to Bryce, but they can hear everything. And Micah's like, don't play stupid. And he's like, I know this is the Great Library of Parthos. So apparently that is a real thing. And Micah says, how did it end up with Jessica Roga? Is it Roga or Roba? Whatever. How did it end up with Jessica when the humans had given their lives to hide these in the first war against the Asteri? And Bryce says, like, are you here to ask me out again? He's like, no, I'm not interested. And everyone is like, Bryce, run. Like, you need to get away from Micah. You have to get out. So Micah says, I think you figured out the horn. And he says, Danica stole it, and you know what she did with it. He says, when Sandriel melted your amulet, it basically revealed everything. So what we find out is Danica did steal the horn. And she ground it up into powder and got it tattooed into Bryce's back. What the hell, Danica? You were the worst.
She literally put a target on her back.
Literally. Literally, you put it in my body without my permission. She got Bryce, like, drunk, took her to a tattoo shop and tattooed the horn on her back. And so that amulet was protecting her. So no one could sense it. And then when she took it off, it immediately exposed her. And then, like, putting the new one on basically, like, had her exposed. And so Micah says, I think if I put synth in you, it will heal the horn and I can use it. You are the horn. And Bryce is like, screw you, asshole. And, like, tries to run, but he grabs her and everyone is like, run. And she's like telling Lahaba to run and Syrinx. And what we learn is that Danica didn't kill herself in the pack. Micah killed them. Well, Danica did, but Micah basically gave her synth. Like, she wasn't using synth. He gave her the synth and made her, like, spaz out and kill the whole pack and herself. And what we also learn is that Micah is an investor into Retina Industries, so that's why he learned about the synth in the first place. And Danica wasn't actually security. She worked for this company to track down people for them, including the humans. So the humans were the ones that were, like, making the synth first. And then, like, she tracked them down and, like, they kind of stole it and all this stuff, basically. And he knows that Danica had stole that footage, basically, that Bryce watched on that flash drive. So Bryce is, like, trying to crawl up the stairs and, like, trying to keep him talking. And, basically, Micah framed Danica with that drug deal to make it look like she was dealing the synth, and then told her, well, he won't tell anyone if she steals the horn for him. So she did, but then she didn't give it to him, and then hurried up and ground it down and did the whole tattoo thing, basically. And Micah was the one that caused the blackout so that Danica could steal the horn. And he basically says he wants to summon an army from another world and kill all the humans. And he's Delulu because he thinks that he can then establish himself as an Asteri. Do you think these super powerful beings are going to let you just, like, rise to the top like that?
Right.
You have to be crazy. But okay, go off, King. And we also learned that he framed Briggs for killing Danica. And he knew that nothing would stop Bryce from finding the horn. So when he couldn't find it, he basically planted this, like, he set up this whole thing with her. And he also planted a seed in the Autumn King's mind to make Rune look for it, but, like, basically pulling on the, like, Autumn King's pride. So Rune looks at his dad and is like, oh, you fucking idiot. You fell for it. You dummy. You dummy. And Micah just basically kept summoning the demon to, like kind of, like, throw them off his track, basically. And he's the one who bombed the Raven to make the humans look suspicious. He burned down her old apartment building to make her think that Hunt did it because he knew what was going down with Hunt. And Hunt realizes that Micah was never even going to honor his bargain because they're all watching this. He knows that Micah was never going to freaking honor it. Like, he was just going to probably kill him or whatever he was going to do. So he pulls out a needle full of scent and he just stabs Bryce. And they're like, great, like, she's going to die. And she immediately starts healing because he was like slamming her against the wall and like all kinds of stuff. And he like had cut, like she had a cut on her. So she immediately starts healing. And so she grabs one of the books and like basically it has magic in it and it causes this like protective bubble around her. So he's like, oh, okay, you think that's going to work? So he grabs Syrinx and throws him in the tank with the knock. Okay. So Syrinx just starts drowning. The knock actually doesn't even do anything to Syrinx. He just like is back in like a corner hiding. So Syrinx is like drowning. He can't swim. The Chimera can't swim. And Bryce figured out that after the attack on the dock, she figured out that she was the Horn too. So she realized that the tattoo, like when she looked in the mirror to make sure her tattoo wasn't scratched, she was like, this is not even an alphabet. Like this is not real letters. And she figured out, basically she put it together that it's the Horn. And so he like tries to like, he puts the scent in her and like, I don't know, he tries to do something because his plan is to like open these gates at like the gates in the city. But nothing happens. So he's like, okay, well, maybe if I carve it out of your back. He's like, sorry, this is going to hurt. Okay. So she grabs another book and it basically like blasts him towards the bathroom and Lahaba's waiting. So it blasts him into the bathroom and Lahaba like shuts the door. But we know it's not going to hold him for long. So Hunt is literally like begging Sandra, like send somebody to her, get her help. And Sandra's like, I mean, like, it's Micah's territory. Like, I don't really have the authority to do anything. And they're like an hour away. Like, I'm not going to be able to do anything. So Bryce grabs a knife and she like goes across the room and she's just like, like, she's like hyperventilating. And they're like, what the hell is she doing? And they're like, she's going to jump in the tank and save Syrinx. So she grabs a knife, does this like hyperventilating thing and jumps in the tank. And Runa's like, this is her freaking ordeal. So she gets in the tank. She grabs Syrinx, but that was the Nock's whole plan because he knew that she was going to come for him. So she, like, there's like this feeding platform that they like drop food down on. So she gets Syrinx out and she tries to get out and the Nock literally like grabs her and is like slamming her on the tank. And so she grabs it in the balls. I don't know what this thing looks like. I literally cannot imagine. But apparently it has balls. I don't know. So she grabs it in the balls. That throws it off. So she gets Syrinx out and she's able to get out and like the Nock almost gets her, but like apparently it can't be exposed to air at all. It like burns them. So it's not able to get her. So she gets Syrinx out and she starts doing CPR on him and like gets him back or whatever. But Micah is literally like melting or banging down this door. So she grabs Syrinx, trying to grab him, like drag him up the stairs. She's like still, like she still keeps healing from her injuries, but it's like slow because they're pretty drastic. And so, like even the Autumn King is like, leave the Chimera, like go. And she's like, of course Bryce isn't going to leave her. These are her friends. She's not going to leave them. So she's like, we have to go. And Lahaba's like, there's not time, BB. I'm going to die. I'm going to die. So Bryce is like, Lahaba, let's go. She's like, Lahaba, you are free. I paid like your debts and I was going to throw a party for you. You are free. And Lahaba says, let me buy you time. And she says, let the world know my first act of freedom was to help my friends.
And it was at this moment that I was like, I'm kind of mad at Dominique.
Don't be mad at me. Oh, I was hurt. So Lahaba starts like doing her like arms or whatever, like summoning this firepower. And she just says, she keeps saying, my friends are with me. I am not afraid. And Bryce is literally like bawling, carrying Syrinx like up the stairs. And like Lahaba summons all her power. Bryce hears like basically Micah burst out of the bathroom. And at that exact time, Lahaba like releases all of her firepower and it explodes the tank. And, basically that drowns her out. And so Lahaba dies.
I was highly upset.
So like that part gets me.
Bawled my eyes out.
Yeah. My friends are with me. I am not afraid. Oh, Lily. Yeah, that hurt a lot. That really hurt. This book hurts. So Bryce hears this and she knows Lahaba's dead. Like she knows that water was gonna like, that blew her out. And she knows the Nock is also dead because, thank God, because it's exposed to the water. And, like, when Lahaba throws her, like, firepower, she's like, this is for Syrinx, and, like, does all that. So, Bryce is like, okay, I have a limited amount of time. So, she takes her time. She goes to Jessica's office. She assembles the Godslayer rifle, and she throws back the antidote that Hypaxia had dropped off. And that was just enough time. And this is when the bullet says the Memento Mori stuff. And I was like, the Midnight Rambler. But anyways, so Hunt's like, Lahaba didn't give her time to escape. He gave her just enough time, like 3 seconds, to like go do what she just did. So as Micah emerges, he probably thinks that Bryce left or whatever. So Bryce is literally like waiting, and she shoots Micah in the damn head. And I was like, yes, like absolutely. And because archangels are so powerful, like when they die, like time warps. So they're watching this still, and like time kind of like slows, and you can literally see the bullet like passing through Micah's head. So Bryce grabs Danica's sword, and she just starts like cutting Micah's ass up to pieces.
Again, like with the
Cristallo, yeah. Like
that's the perfect move.
Yeah, make sure they are dead. And now Sabine's pissed. Like, oh, I knew you had the sword the whole time. Like, Sabine, shut the hell up, please. Shut up. So, she, like, cuts him up. She cuts his freaking head off, burns him up, and then vacuums his ass into the vacuum cleaner. She vacuums him up with, like a dirt devil. I cannot. Like, I can't express, like, the amount.
Okay.
Like, that's just... chef's kiss. Like, thank you, Bryce. So she vacuums him up. So, and then after that, like the Ox do finally arrive. Like, they did get somebody to come. And Hypaxia realizes that the antidote is working. Like, because Bryce has not, like, by this point, with the amount of synth he gave her, she should be, like, ripping herself to shreds. And she's not. So the antidote did work. So the Ox arrive, and she's like, oh, it was a gas explosion, basically. And Jessica texts and is like, are you all right? And she says, we saw everything. Bryce goes down to the basement just to check, and of course there is no Lahaba, and Lahaba's gone. So she goes up and she goes outside, and like there's screaming everywhere. So we thought that what Micah didn't do anything, but it did. Micah opened all the gates in the city to hell, and there are demons from hell running amok across the city. And Hunt is like, this is bad. Rune says they'll kill Bryce. Like, talking about the hysteria, he's like, they're going to kill her. Like, they're going to kill her because she just killed an archangel. And while this is all going on, like, they start arguing amongst themselves, and Hypaxia unlocks Hunt's handcuffs, basically. So the demons are, like, pouring out of the heart gate. He opened a portal to hell. So, like, Bryce is able to, like, get Syrinx to her apartment and, like, is like, stay here, you'll be good, whatever. And she goes back out, and she's telling everyone to get to shelter. Juniper calls her and is like, I'm in the shelter. They won't let humans in. And it's not just the heart gate. It's all 7 of the gates in the city. So Sabine and the Autumn King are like calling their people, like, get locked down or whatever. But they only care about the wolves and like the Fae. Like, they only care about their people, basically. And Rune and Hunt are trying to like send their Ox out to go help these people. And Sabine's like, no, like, you wolves, you stay in the den. Like, you don't come out. And the Autumn King saying the same thing. Like, so they don't care about anybody else. And Sabine calls Ethan, and Ethan's like, we can't keep him back. Like, we can't keep him away. And Sabine says, just stay put. But Hypaxia calls the witches and is like, get your brooms. Like, we're about to, like, suit up, basically. And Hypaxia points at the screen at Bryce and is like, I would rather die like her than sit here like a coward. And Bryce is literally, like, running through the streets now, and we realize she's running to Asphodel Meadows, like, to help the humans. So Hypaxia gets a call from the witches, and all of their brooms are destroyed. Every vehicle at the summit is destroyed because Micah was planning on them not being able to leave and come help. So, like, what the hell? And so Fury's like, well, I have a helicopter that I keep hidden away, so we can use that. But it's still going to take them, like, an hour to get there. And Sabine says, like, there are no wolves left to help anyways. But the Prime points at Bryce right there and is like, that's a true wolf. And Sabine's like, no, like, you're just old, like, you're confused. And he's like, no, that's a true wolf right there. Hunt calls the Viper Queen and is like, you owe me. Like, you need to go help because you freaking got me arrested, basically. And Bryce calls Jessica, and Hunt tries to, like, tell Bryce, like, go to a shelter. And over the speaker, we hear Ethan, like, yelling to Bryce because he can kind of hear, like, all this going on. And he's like, Bryce, I'm coming. And Sabine's like, you stay put. But they, like, all the wolves just hang up on Sabine. Like, I'm not hearing that, Sabine. Like, please be quiet. So Bryce is, like, almost taken out by a demon, but then one of the Viper Queen's guards, like, show up and help her, and then the wolves arrive. So Ethan is in wolf form, and she looks at him, and, like, he's the biggest of the wolves. Like, Connor used to be really big, but Ethan is huge, basically. And there's like countdowns going off, and there's only 3 minutes for people to get into the shelters before it locks down. So like her and Ethan team up, they're kicking butt, they're like killing everyone, and they're down to 30 seconds. So they're like, get in the shelter. So they start running, and the wolves are trying to like hold the door, but it's like, you know, it's like the purge, like the stuff is shutting down. And so she realizes that like her and Ethan both won't make it through in time. So she kind of like falls back and pushes him, and he runs in, the door closes, and she like runs into the door because her momentum was still going. And then she can just hear Ethan like beating on the door from the other side, like pissed that she pushed him in there and didn't save herself. And she can hear like every door in the city like bang shut. The shelters are all closed. And she's like, okay, maybe if I make it to my apartment, like there's wards, I should be good. But she's like 20 blocks away. Like she's not going to make it. So Bryce calls Hunt, and Rune is like, Sandra has his phone. So Rune's like, give him the phone. Like, give him the phone. So she tells Hunt, like, I'm not going to make it. The gates are still open. And she says, call my mom, tell her I love her, tell her everything I am is because of her. And she says, tell my dad, my real dad. And the Autumn King is like, like basically, like, you know, she ain't talking about you. And she's like, tell Randall that he's the only one that ever mattered. She says, tell Fury, I'm sorry I lied. Tell Juniper, thank you for that night on the roof and from stopping me from jumping so I could be here. Tell Rune, I'm sorry. Tell him I love him and I forgave him a long time ago and I just didn't know how to tell him. And she tells Hunt, I was waiting for you. And Hunt is like begging her, like, please, like, just go to the apartment. Like, let me get to you. Please don't do this. And she says, I forgive you. None of it matters. And she just like hangs up and she runs towards the heart gate and light freaking starts emerging off of her. So we go in a little memory back to that day when her and Danica got in that motorcycle wreck. And what we learn is the truth that Bryce did kill some of them. She did save them, but that is because Bryce has starlight. She is a starborn fae. And she basically told Danica to close her eyes and like literally blinded everyone. And what we learn is that she never told Rune because when she met Rune, he was so excited to be like the starborn prince and all of that. And like how, you know, finally like somewhere in this book, I don't talk about a lot, but Rune was abused by the Autumn King. Like he used to burn him and abuse him really badly. And so like she just didn't want to mess up like that for Rune because he was finally like being treated somewhat better by his dad. So she just kept it to herself. And also what we learn is that when her and her mom were running from the Autumn King and Randall came with them, it wasn't Randall that saved them from the men that the Autumn King sent after him. It was Bryce. Like she blinded them too. So she slams into the gate basically with her light and it seals the portal. And like, even though that one's sealed, the other portals are still open. So the Autumn King is pissed. And he calls Ember. He's like, so you knew this whole time. He calls her like a bitch. And Ember says, I've been waiting 20 years for this phone call. And she's like, who do you think took care of your men? Not Randall. She blinded them. Only her, Randall, and Danica knew the truth. And Hunt tells Rune that, like, because Rune's upset, and he's like, she was protecting you, like, basically, like, she didn't want to take that title from you. And the Autumn King says, like, that doesn't make any sense, because Bryce is test, so that, like, she doesn't have any power. And Ember says, you're right, she doesn't. She has starlight, it's not power. And Ember says, when she met you, she loved Rune more than she hated you, and didn't want to take, like, his title from him. And Hypaxia grabs Hunt, and she starts, like, glowing, and she freaking removes Hunt's halo. And basically, the reason that the horn worked is because it had to be wielded by a star-born fae, and Danica tattooed it into her, so, like, Danica knew that it would work. And so Hunt's mark is gone, and he starts summoning his lightning, and Sandriel's like, okay, like, what are you doing? But before Sandriel can even, like, blink, he fries her to, like, bits, and, like, ruin everyone, like, duck and hide, and he, like, literally, like, goes like full like Thor mode. Like I think about Thor in like Ragnarok when he like slams into like the bridge. I love Thor, by the way. And like he's like all like lightning or whatever, and his sister's like, what are you again, the god of thunder or whatever? Like that's what I think when I think of like this scene with Hunt. And I'm like, I love it. Anyways, so he fries her, and then like they stand up and Hunt is literally like holding her head like Medusa. Like,
I was like, she seems to have a common theme of
yeah, she loves a head being cut off. So after this, like, Isaiah and all the rest of the angels literally, like, bow to Hunt because, like, he's so powerful. And Hunt smiles at the Autumn King and is like, you want some? Basically. And he tells Fury, like, get the helicopter, like, let's go. And Fury tells Hunt that Bryce was a ghost for a long time and you brought her back to life. So Bryce is, like, drained. Like, the light is keeping the demons away from her for now, but, like, it won't work forever. And then we see that the Asteri have sent some tanks. And they're going to bomb the city, basically, with Bryce in it. And so she tries to run from the first one, but it goes off. And she's okay, but her foot gets, like, trapped under, like, something that exploded. And so Hunt, like, and Fury are able to get to her. And Hunt, like, his wings have not grown back. So he basically just, like, free falls out of the sky, basically. And he lands on top of her at the same time as another bomb goes off. And she's fine, but, like, Hunt is, like, blown to smithereens, basically. He has, like, a hole in his back. His legs are gone. Like, she's like, oh, my God, he's dead. But he's just, like, barely breathing. His feathers, like, that he had back were, like, flying in the air. And, like, Therian and Rune are, like, in the city, but they're not close enough to her. And Declan says, like, they won't make it. And so Bryce says to him, like, if he can hear her, like, I believe this was all for a reason and not for nothing. So Bryce goes to the gates because, again, they can communicate with each other. And she says, if anyone can hear me, come to the gate. I just need someone. She's like, I know how to fix it. Please come to the gate and put your hand on the disc. The gate is a conduit. She says, I need an anchor. She's going to do the drop. And so she tells Hunt to hold on and, like, no one comes. So she's like, forget it, whatever. So she just starts running and we hear Danica go, like, light it up, Bryce, light it up. So she stumbles to the gate and she's like, light it up, Danica. And she slams her hand into the gate and she makes the freaking drop with no anchor. So Sabine is like, everyone's like, what is going on? Like, she doesn't have an anchor. Like, you can't do the drop without an anchor. And Sabine says that the Underking told her Danica had a small kernel of energy, but it's not enough to anchor Bryce, like, for her drop. So Bryce, like, starts dropping. And as you drop, basically, like, they can see, like, what your power level is. So she surpasses her power level, what it was supposed to be. And she drops all the way down past her dad. Like, she is more powerful than all of them. And what it is that in the beginning of this book, when they would go to the stone and touch, like, the stone, it would take a drop of their power. And on the gate, it literally says that the power belongs to those who have given their life for the city. So she basically is, like, absorbs all the power that has ever been dropped in the city for, like, the last 1,000 years or whatever. Like, she has all that power. And so as she's making the drop, like, she is making that first light again. So the city is healing, or Hunt heals, and it closes, like, all of the portals. And the Autumn King says, well, she might be more powerful than me, but she won't make the ascent back up because she doesn't have an anchor. And so her heart flatlines. They can see her vitals, basically. And so her clock starts, and she has 6 minutes to get back to life, basically. But as she is at the bottom of her power, she sees Danica. And Danica says, like, there's not time. You got to get back. And Bryce is like, I'm not going back. And Danica's like, what the hell are you talking about, Bryce? And she's like, basically, Danica's like, Bryce, I am dead. I'm dead. You're not. Like, you need to go back. And Bryce asks her, like, why did you lie to me about the horn? And Danica's like, well, I didn't really lie. Danica, stop it. Stop it. Stop it, stop it, stop it. But Danica says, like, basically, like, I was trying to protect you. And she tells her, like, the pack is with me. I can't stay. And she's like, Connor would want you to keep fighting. And she asks Bryce, like, so what about the angel? And Bryce says, you're trying to convince me to make the ascent for a guy. And Danica's basically like, I mean, yeah, basically. But, like, she tells him, like, he's healed, basically. Like, you healed him. And Bryce is running out of time. So the countdown is, like, at 0.33 seconds. And she finally starts making her ascent. So she, like, basically, it's, like, kind of like a, I don't know, like a platform. I don't know. It's like that. It's like the end. You never watch Harry Potter. It's like the end of, like, the last Harry Potter movie when, like, he kind of dies and he, like, is in that, like, weird space that's like a train station. That's what I imagine this to be like. It's like this weird, like, out of body experience thing. I don't know. That's what I imagine it to be like. So she starts, like, running, and then she, like, blasts upward and just surges. And the Autumn King is like, that is not possible. And he's like, she's alone. And Sabine says, no, she isn't. And the Autumn King says, how? And the Prime says, the most powerful force in the world, love. Sarah J. Maas loves love. Like, she
sure
loves love, man. And so in the meantime, while she's making her ascent, Hunt is, like, doing CPR on her. Like, he's zapping her with his lightning and, like, pressing on her chest. He's pumping her. He's like, I heard what you said, you coward. Like, come back and say it to my face, basically. Like, because she basically said, like, she loved him. And, don't tell me that when I'm dying. Like, tell me to my face. So Danica's gone as she's making this ascent, and she starts to hear Hunt. And he can feel her, like, coming back to life. And she wakes up, seeing, like, that his halo tattoo is gone. And she says, did you call me a fucking coward? So they go home, and Syrinx is out, like, at the door, and the door's open. And she says, I know that I shut this door. And Hunt says, I'll tell you about his powers later. And she finally, like, all her adrenaline's gone. She finally breaks down crying. And Hunt tells her that he killed Sandriel, but he wants to hear, like, her story, basically, first. And now, like, not only does she have star power, but now the star is physically present, like, on her chest. And so, like, they start canoodling, and, like, Syrinx is like, you know what, I'm gonna go in the other room. Like, I'm good, Mom. I'm gonna go in the other room. But freaking Ember calls, and, like, her mom's in tears, and she's like, you saved the city, you made the drop, and, like, you're too busy to talk to me. So Bryce, like, starts, like, turning on her shower, like, or whatever. And she tells Bryce that, like, the Autumn King called her. And Hunt can hear, like, what she assumes is, like, Ember asking, like, has she had sex with Bryce? And, like, Ember is, like, basically asking Bryce, like, is she hooking up with Hunt and all this stuff? Because Bryce tells her, like, Mom, you're a pervert. And then she's like, well, if you think that's what I'm doing, like, why are you calling me right now? Like, what do you think you're interrupting, basically? But Isaiah calls Hunt also, and he's like, I don't know what to do. Like, Isaiah's basically in charge now, but none of the angels want to listen to him. So he's like, can I get your help? And Hunt's like, Bryce, do you want to, like, go help me, like, wrangle these angels? But Bryce gets an unknown call, and it's Rigulus, the Asteri. And he says, like, we want to extend our thanks and gratitude for what you did for the city, and we want to grant you a favor. And first of all, you just tried to kill me with bombs. And Bryce is like, I'm good. Like, I don't need anything. Like, I don't want any favors from you guys. I'm good. But he says the favor's already done. And at the same time, Hunt is looking at his wrist, and that tattoo is gone now too. So Hunt is no longer a slave. So the tattoo on his wrist marked him as a slave. The tattoo on his head, like, reduced his power. So there was like, everyone that's a slave doesn't have, like, reduced powers, basically. So the Asteri basically tell Bryce to live out your life in the city and enjoy your life with Athalar, and don't use the horn. So basically what they want is for them to stay quiet. Like, they don't want anybody to know that those two both killed an archangel today. And basically he kind of, like, threatens her, because he's like, do I need to contact your mom and, like, let her know? And she's like, no, like, I get it loud and clear. And Rigulus says that her and Hunt have, like, their blessing, basically. And then he hangs up. And then Fury and Rune arrive, and Rune just starts, like, bawling, crying, and, like, hugging her. And she hugs him back. And he asks, like, if she meant what she said on the phone. And he says, like, I don't care about being a Starborn. Like, that does not matter to me at all. And Bryce says that Hunt told me about the mind-speaking thing. And apparently, the Autumn King doesn't know about this power that Rune has. So what we learn is, like, after the aftermath of all of this is that, of course, the Fae had the least amount of casualties because they didn't help anybody. They went into their shelter and didn't save a soul. The River Queen reaches out to Bryce and is like, you know, you have my support, basically. And Bryce tells Juniper that she is going to start coming back to dance. So Bryce goes and, like, reads Danica's messages. And she reads all of her messages from Connor. And then she texts Connor's number and tells him that she's home. Because the last thing Connor had texted her that night was, message me when you get home safe. And then she deletes their messages and their voicemails to just, like, finally, like, let that go. And she's, like, outside, and so she can see the bone quarter and, like, the mist parts. And she basically, Danica's not there. Like, Danica basically used up all her power. Danica's gone. But she sees, like, the whole pack, like, waving at her, basically, for a moment. And then we go to the epilogue. And Jessica is meeting with Adis in his cat form. And she says, why didn't you tell me about Bryce's light? And that Bryce basically has Thea's power. And he says, Athalar, or, like, Hunt's father would be proud, don't you think? And basically Adis says, like, things are about to get interesting. The end.
The end.
So, thoughts? Ratings.
Thoughts. Okay. Yeah. So I am going to start out by saying last episode we ended on
the Sabine thing.
Yeah, and I said that they had talked about whoever knew where the
cameras
were had to have high clearance. I literally immediately went to Micah.
You're so good at this.
Wasn't entirely sure, but I was like, something is going on.
Yeah.
So I had a little inkling, of a feeling there. Yeah, no, I wasn't a big fan of Danica.
Yeah. She's a bad friend.
Yeah. You had mentioned, I think yesterday, that Hunt wasn't your favorite either. He's okay. But I feel the same way. I mean, he's okay, but
I love their relationship, but like Hunt on his own, like no. Like I
was really upset the whole, he was on
the drug deal.
Yeah, and I was
stupid. So stupid.
Heartbroken when Lahaba sacrificed herself.
I know. Lily.
And my biggest issue with the book, which going through the negative reviews, and just what you said about what other people, a lot of world building.
Lots.
But I don't mind world building. I just think that she put too much in a short period of time.
Yeah.
It felt more like, going back to school when they're telling you to write your papers, show me, don't tell me.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
And she did a lot of just kind of throwing it at you. It would have been better if she, worked it in.
Yeah.
Which I struggled a little bit in the beginning because of that, but I feel like once you get past chapter 2, then it was smooth sailing.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it, though. Really enjoyed it. Great action. Amazing character development. I truly cared for the characters in the first few chapters. So, yeah, brava. Loved it.
Yeah, this was a reread for me, and, like, I just, again, like, I pretty much like anything that she writes. Everyone's, like, every book is not going to be, like, stellar. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, it's interesting that, like, like, most people don't like Athalar. Like, we like the series, but the first one, like, you have to get through the first one.
Yeah.
But, like, this one, like, this is such a good first book. Like, it's so good. And, like, all of the, like, emotional turmoil with Bryce, like, it just really gets you in your feels. Like, I love Lahaba, too. Mm-hmm. Like, I love that. And I feel so bad for Bryce because she was just in the dark. Like, I mean, I do think that Danica loved her. But, like, Danica, you suck. Like, Danica's all, like, the greater good. Like, at the end of the day. And it's like, you freaking tattooed the horn on my back.
Yeah.
And I feel like Bryce just brushes by that entirely. Like, and it is, like Fury said, like, you forgive Danica to a fault. Like, that, and I know she's dead, like, so there's not much you can do about it now. But, like, you freaking tattooed the horn on my back.
Yeah. Like, that isn't something that you could have at least, like, hey, haha, it's tattooed on you already. You can't
or at least let me know, like, after you did it. Like, I mean, I know there wasn't that much time between when she did it and when she died, but, like...
But, literally, like we said, put a literal target on her back.
Yeah, no. And, like, Micah, like, showing up and them all being at the summit and just, like, watching... That's crazy. Craziness. I just... yeah. So, what did you rate this?
I rated it... so, I'm just going to say rounding up to 5. It was between 4.5 and 5 for me.
Okay.
So, round up to 5.
Yeah. I 5-starred it. I really enjoyed, like, reading it again. Normally when I reread books, it's hard for me. Not because they're not good, but it's just, like... I know what's happening, so like it's hard for me. I didn't really struggle with this one, like getting through it. Normally I'm like, I already know what's happening, so I'm not like such a rush to like get through it, and like the anticipation's not there. So when I have to take notes, it's hard for me to do rereads. But like, I really enjoyed like rereading this again. So, any thoughts on like where this? Obviously, there's at least 2 more books already. So like, what now?
I really don't have any thoughts. I honestly thought that it would have been like a perfect like
And
solo book.
yeah.
I did have to immediately go read the blurb, but it didn't really give much information. So yeah, no, I have no idea.
Yeah. Have you looked through the cover?
I have.
I'm not like good at like looking at anything, but like I don't know if you had any thoughts about it, because like people are always like looking and like trying to theorize, and like I'm like, I don't know what I'm looking at. I don't know.
Obviously, I don't catch anything when it comes to covers because I didn't know about the.
Oh yeah, the mask. That's funny. Do you think that Hunt and Bryce are in game?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I'd be fine either way.
Mm-hmm. What about like Rune and Hypaxia? Do you think that's gonna become something?
I hope so.
Mm-hmm.
I hope so.
Yeah. I like Hypaxia.
Yeah.
I do throughout the whole series. What else happened? What do you think is gonna happen with like Hunt, since he's free now?
Yeah.
Like he could still work for the 33rd if he chooses to, like
Right.
Naomi does, but
I have no idea. I'm assuming through at least one of the following books that we'll get more information on who his father is, but
and then like there's Bryson. So obviously like the Jessica's building was like trashed, and also Bryce like is indebted to her. So like, what do you think? What do you think about Jessica?
that's a question. That is
I
a
like
question.
Jessica.
I don't not like her.
Mm-hmm.
I do like her. I also am curious and cautious, suspicious
Yeah.
of her. I do like her though.
Okay. All right. Well, what about our reviews?
So let's see. There are
Oh yeah.
674,224 ratings.
Dang.
With a little over 74,000 reviews. There are almost 6,000 one-star reviews, what puts it at less than 1%.
Oh.
A lot of these reviews are either like 12 pages long or they're like one word. But I found one that was like a 12-page long one, but it was the first little, I'll just read the first little chunk of the one-star review. And they said, I feel about this book the way every dad feels when their child does something stupid. I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. Imagine you're watching Zootopia. In the background, someone is playing Bright on Netflix, obnoxiously loud, and then, almost insidiously lurking in the corner, comes, of all things, the Winx Club theme song. Mix it all together, slap on a pretty cover, and you've got this book.
That was oddly specific.
Very specific, and I found it hilarious. Now on to our 5-star reviews, which there is 422,000 at about 62% of the ratings being 5 stars. Okay, 5 stars. This may be my top 10 of 2020. I love SJM and I love fantasy, especially when there's some romance in here. First, let's talk about the romance. The romance is Slow Burn City. Seriously, I was so obsessed with the angst between Hunt and Bryce and how the chemistry was brewing and brewing. His wing would graze her back, and I would swoon. I was obsessed with any hint of their romance, and I was shipping them the entire time. As for fantasy, I would classify this one more of an urban fantasy because it takes place in modern day and is all about Bryce and Hunt trying to solve a mystery. I really enjoyed all the different creatures and paranormal races involved in this book and wish we had more. And then I'll just stop there. There's a lot, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, our next book is Where Sleeping Girls Lie, and I cannot pronounce her name. Do you know how to? Is it a female author?
Yes.
Yes.
I have to look into that.
Okay. We will not butcher your name, so
I'll come prepared next week.
Next time. Yeah, we'll know how to say it for that, but it's Where Sleeping Girls Lie. Is it a thriller, horror?
It is an dark academia thriller.
Interesting. I'm intrigued. The cover looks really nice.
Yes, takes place at a boarding school.
Ooh, I like that.
Boarding school, private school. I mean,
same difference. Okay, I like that. So, and look, the timing of this is perfect. I'm so proud of myself. Anyways, so if you're not already following us, make sure you're following us on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook at Booktrospective, and check out our website. I think we are, I'm sure we'll way surpass this. We've already surpassed our goals for the year. We might have to do a mid-year check, because I think we've surpassed all of our goals that we set in December. So you guys are doing amazing. Keep being amazing and keep listening to us. But I think that's all I got. Anything else?
I think that's all.
All right. Bye.
Bye.